Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Peyton List, who is an actor and producer on the series School Spirits. And one of the first things that I wanted to talk about was the way that you've shaped this character, because I think one of the aspects that's really interesting about Maddie is the fact that she is a very ordinary teenage girl going through a very ordinary high school experience before everything happened at the beginning of season one. And, we kind of saw she didn't know everybody in school and wasn't close to everybody, but she did have this really tight knit group of friends who she clearly had an impact on. And I was interested in how that projection of who she was really shaped the way that you developed this character at the beginning.
Yeah, that's a good question. Her knowing that she has these two close friends and knowing that Maddie didn't even really share a lot with her best friends about her life. They didn't really know all that much about her relationship with her mom and, that she's having to take care of her mom and kind of hide her alcoholism. And I feel like whenever she's going through it, she just kind of jokes around and wants to go see a horror movie, and that's kind of that. But then when she does realize that she can only communicate to Simon in order to get her life back, she has to look her problems in the face, and she has to get really real and really vulnerable with her best friend. And she, in a weird way, has to go much deeper than she ever did when she was alive.
It also feels like the vulnerability that you were talking about that she now has with Simon that didn't necessarily exist before, that also impacts and influences the relationship that she has with the other ghosts and the other spirits around her, because she's very open with them in a way that she's been learning to be on this journey. And so how did you want her guard to come down in those sorts of relationships as much as they did with Simon?
Yeah, I think that she kind of realizes with going to group that they're not open, and their system is messed up, and so she has to kind of lead by example, and she has to be open in order to get what she wants. And I think it kind of forces her out of her comfort zone, without her even necessarily realizing. And I think these new friendships and talking to people from different generations, I think becoming close to them has opened her mind up a lot. Yeah, and just she's forced to.
It also feels like she's so good at being a mediator within that group setting as well. Whenever other people are fighting and arguing, she's always the first person to try and diffuse the situation. And I was curious if you think a lot of that comes from the household that she grew up in and everything that she went through with her mom, and just really wanting things to feel as stable as she can around her.
Yeah, I definitely think so. It's when growing up with a ticking time bomb around, I think you're always trying to diffuse the situation. And if there is a chaotic person or a chaotic dynamic growing up, I think that Maddie did have to learn, okay, how am I gonna calm my mom down, or how am I gonna get this situation handled and have no one really learn about it? So yeah, I think she's amazing at that, and that's something that I'm always like, she knows the perfect thing to say. And I love getting to play her because of that, because I just think I'm bad at finding the words sometimes, and Megan and Nate are just, I think it's really our showrunners and creators. I think Maddie is really them, and they're very grounded people who dealt with a parent like that. So it really just comes from their experience.
And she clearly has so much love, and she feels so protective towards her mom. And we saw so much of that play out in season one. And I was kind of interested in where you see that dynamic growing in season two of, still trying to protect her mom from a distance because they went through so much, even though she couldn't talk directly to her.
I think one of the main reasons Maddie wants to get back to her life is to be there for her mom and to protect her. So yeah, I mean, it's really like the heart of the story, I think, is Sandra and her that relationship and that dynamic.
And it was really lovely to see that scene at the end of season one where her mom kind of comes to the school and gives that speech. And for Maddie, it was almost like she gets to hear the words of, you do understand the impact that this had on me, and you do regret a lot of the decisions and choices that you've made. And did you feel like going into season 2 that that healed something in Maddie and healed part of their relationship to a degree?
Definitely, yeah, because I know that Maddie thought maybe her mom was better off without her in her life because she was suddenly kind of getting her act together. And that's definitely, but then, yeah, hearing her mom, I mean, Maria Dizia, that speech was so beautiful. I remember watching her give that speech about Maddie and just bawling my eyes out, and the camera wasn't even on me yet, and I was just like, she's just so good.
One of the wonderful things is there's so many scenes where Maddie is watching everyone around her and being able to observe them without them knowing that she's watching them. And kind of like from an actor's standpoint, is there almost a really lovely gift in that you get to really watch and study and observe all of your castmates and all of your scene partners and kind of seeing the way that they work a lot as well.
Oh my gosh, yes, that's such a great, I love that you pointed that out because it's so much fun. It's like watching a video on your phone, you know? It's like you get to just watch and everyone's reacting around you, but I love not having to emote and not having to join in sometimes, so it's kind of perfect, but it's also really fun to watch everyone because it's such a challenge for them. I mean, even for background actors that come in, and it's funny because the AD will be like, nobody look at Peyton at all, don't look in her direction, don't acknowledge her, and I'm like, I swear I'm nice, like, this is not a request I'm making, but it's fun. And even just like wiping my hand in front of Christian and like getting to watch him act and like getting in people's personal space while they're doing a scene is also really fun.
Right, it must make the blocking of scenes something that's quite different on this show because, like you said, you can literally do this in front of someone, but also just in terms of where Maddie stands, she doesn't need to stand directly in front of them because it's not a two-way conversation. And so what has been your experience in just the blocking of this show being very different because of the parameters of the character?
Yeah, the blocking is just, it's like, okay, here are the rules, now throw them away. Now, what do you want to do with the scene? Which I love, and that definitely took me a minute because I'm just so used to the standard like walk and talk or, and so it's fun to be like, okay, where would a person who's not seen in the room, who gets to destroy anything with no consequences, what would they do and where would they go? So it's the most fun thing to get to block these scenes. At the beginning, it was a learning curve. It wasn't as fun. It was frustrating, especially when like, we do everything practically. So if I have a phone prop and it's thrown and then it's back in my hand, we're having to reset it. And it was hard for me to understand how it works at first. Like I was just learning along with everyone else the rules of it. And so that was mostly what we were doing in reshoots of the show, was just going back and cleaning up the rules of the whole world.
And you were bringing up the creators of the show, Nate and Megan, as well as your showrunner, Oliver Goldstick, for the series. And I remember in season 1 hearing you talk about the way that you would get the scripts, 1 or 2 at a time throughout. So you didn't necessarily know the entire end point, even though they obviously did, but that really helped you because Maddie didn't know all of the details either. So you were kind of learning in tandem with her. Mm-hmm. And I was curious if that was the same process for this season, if you're if you were still getting the scripts and getting the information in tandem with your character.
Yeah, I was again. I really liked that method of getting the scripts as they come. I think Megan and Nate only told me information that would be helpful. Like Josh Zuckerman, who played Mr. Martin, he knew Mr. Martin's motives the entire first season, and he actually knew the ending because he would know. So I feel like they just told us information that we would, especially when playing 2 characters now and playing Janet. They were giving me a lot of information about Janet.
Right, and I wanted to talk about that in terms of, jumping into the spoilers for the first couple of episodes of this season, because it's so interesting to watch you kind of play present day ghost Maddie, flashback Maddie and her memories, and now you have the added element of Janet. And I was just interested in kind of how you approach that and how you track all of the details, because each of them requires something slightly different from you in terms of where she's at emotionally and even just the physicality.
Yeah, I had to create a whole board, like one Janet board, one Maddie board, because I was filming every single day. It wasn't like I had breaks because I was in both of the storylines. And so, being in the school, it's so different from being out on the bus, at the farmhouse, being in all those places. So I had to keep track of it. And then luckily, Jess Gabor, who's playing Janet, we would be swapping in and out of shots. Like, I like how they did a little bit of a different take where you can see Maddie sitting in the bus seat, and then you see Janet's reflection, and just like playing with the reflections and playing with things, but having her there to ask her those questions about Janet and everyone was helping me keep track.
Yeah, the details of it are so great, and I even just love seeing the difference in the movement and the way that her body language shapes, because, you know, Janet comes from a different time period, but also has a lot of trauma herself and is going out into the world in a space where she's very uncertain and she hasn't existed in the world as it is in the present day. And so what were some of the details that you found to be really different in playing the Janet iteration of Maddie?
Yeah, I mean, I love the scene where the woman at the bus stop is telling her just to download an app and call a car, and she's just looking at her like, "What are you talking about? What's an app?" And like seeing this girl from the 50s have to exist in modern society, and she hasn't been out of this school in decades. So that was really fun to just get to like create those distinctions and know, okay, what would she know what this woman is talking about? What references would she understand? And then just the posture. I tried on Jess's wardrobe. Jess was like, go into the fitting and try on my clothes too, so you can feel like just how different wearing like a high-waisted tight skirt is, and just like that is what is expected. She comes from this like religious, conservative household. Like, how would she hold herself? And just like, yeah, creating all those things with Jess, and even like little hair tucks and little like insecure movements, and those little things are like what helps blend the flashbacks to the Maddie Janet moments.
She also starts the beginning of this season with Simon questioning, am I actually really seeing you, or is this just something that I created in my imagination as a coping mechanism for my grief? And it was interesting to watch Maddie go through those first couple of episodes without having that communication with him. And I was interested from your perspective, what was the difference that you saw in Maddie when she didn't have that relationship? And, you know, she still has other people around her in terms of the other spirits and the other ghosts, but she didn't have her best friend and the person she's closest to.
Yeah, that's all she could focus on. When she couldn't talk to Simon, it's like it is her only connection to having a life again, or having her life back. So it felt like all the air was taken out, and like she really was dead, you know? So I think she needed to talk to Simon in order to feel okay, and he's her rock.
And I love the mechanism of how they communicated a lot when other people were around, of just kind of like setting up the phone calls. But I imagine that you also had to think very specifically about where can he hear her and where can he see her, and where would that line be where suddenly it drops out. And so how did the two of you figure out those details at the beginning of making this show when it was something quite different to play with together?
Yeah, we didn't even know exactly why yet, because we didn't know that, you know, people had to die in the spots for you to talk to them. So we were just constantly trying to keep track of, just like the characters, honestly, just where it was that we could talk. But it was funny not knowing the why.
And what's your relationship in working with Christian Flores and kind of like building that history? Because obviously at the beginning of season 1, you're building that history from scratch, but going into the second season, you know, you have all of that experience of filming all of those scenes and creating all of that emotional closeness with your characters.
I just have such a love for Christian. I feel like we both understand that, and we might feel similarly, that when we get on set and we're in the costumes and we're talking to each other, I feel this like insane best friendship with Christian. And he really is such a good friend and like a scene partner in real life. Like he'll be like, oh, I wanted to, he'll, you know, give an energy behind the camera to get a reaction from you, or try something cool. And like, he's just a really giving friend and actor.
I love that. You know, you just brought up the costumes, and there's so many details like the costumes that just feel very authentic in the way that they're presented. They're not trying to make this high fashion, really stylized high school, but really, you know, what would these kids wear that's comfortable to be in class all day when they're around their friends and people that they feel comfortable with? What are some of the details that you found in the costumes and some of the other aspects in the show that really speak to that authenticity of just a very grounded high school experience?
I love that it's like, okay, well, what would this kid really do to their hair? Or how much makeup would they where like, let's see like skin, let's see acne, let's see like the real, like, let's not hide anything. Even like with the missing photo of Maddie, it's her school picture, and I was just making like really awkward, like ugly kind of faces in the school photo because I was like, Maddie wouldn't care about this at all. Like, this is she would hate that. So there was just, we would try to think of all of the smallest little details.
One of the other aspects that's really striking about Maddie as well in the show is, even having passed on, she's still so connected to her life in the real world. And it's something that she really cherishes, even though, she had such a complicated childhood and upbringing and a lot of pain and a lot of trauma in her existence. And, what was the relationship that you found very early on for her to have with her living self and the life and the way that she's still so connected to it?
Yeah, I guess like you really don't know what you have until it's gone, and just the frustration of wanting to be able to touch, your best friends, and I think, yeah, once she's out, I think she really wakes up to just how asleep she was in her life, and like just how much she was on autopilot, and just really like taking a lot for granted, which I think is so easy to do as a teenager, like. Everything just sucks, and you make jokes about wanting to die and like you'd rather die than even be there, and then there's a moment where it's not a joke anymore, and you want to go back, and you're like, wait a minute, that was great, I did love that. And I always loved the play Our Town growing up, and it kind of reminds me of that moment where she like goes back and visits her family's home and realizes what she had that she was just completely asleep for.
Do you think that there was a bit of a difference in terms of how she got to interact with people around her, that are still students and teachers in the high school, and relationships that she had in her life? Because season 1 was very much trying to figure out what happened and who might be responsible for this. And now she has at least some of the answers to that and kind of has a specific person to really be questioning, as opposed to having to look at everyone around her. And so did you feel like that shifted a lot of the relationships, being able to know that she can fully trust these people?
100%. Yeah. Having the relief and having the closure of knowing that it wasn't anyone in her life. I mean, I can't imagine how heavy that would be, questioning everyone around you. I mean, everyone was a suspect. And so having to not only know that you're dead, but then having to guess which person you trusted would have committed something like that was just, it's definitely a very different energy. It feels like almost like a different character, just because of how different the circumstances are.
She's also in such a different position now of, she knows that her physical body is out there and embodied by someone else. And, there's no clear path to whether she can ever get back to that, but it is a possibility in her mind. And do you think that she's very consciously thinking about that very much, and the idea of, if I did go back to my human self, I would actually have to leave behind all these relationships that I've built and that I really cherish and value now?
Yeah, that's the hardest part of this season is the ghost characters. Like Maddie has completely fallen in love with Wally, Charlie, and Rhonda. I think they've surprised her in every single way and have just become they've become a team in figuring all this out. And she's just so locked in on figuring out what happened that when there is a time where she has to start thinking about possibly saying goodbye, it's just she wanted to go back to her life so badly, and now she's looking at these people and she's unsure. Like she's frozen. She doesn't really know what to do.
I also remember hearing you talk about in season 1 how, being number 1 on the call sheet and being a lead on the show for the first time was something that really took you outside of your comfort zone. And so I wanted to ask about the experience of that going into a second season of the show, with the experience that you were able to build upon from season 1, and if that still felt the same or if it was a little bit different for you this time around.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just wanted to be friends with everyone from the beginning. Like I didn't want to be separate, or it didn't really change anything. I mean, I think that there was things that I didn't even know were in my contract, if I'm being really honest here. Like I had my own like ride to set, my own van, like separate, and I was like, I don't want to be separate. Like I want to hang out with everyone and like collaborate and like we can have like conversations about like what we're about to do for the day and then like decompress together on the way back. So there was just funny things that I was like, no, like nothing changed. And yeah, nothing really changed.
And it's also such a gift as well in having a second season of a show and getting to spend so much time with a character that you've built and developed and really cared about. And I was interested in just the relationship that you feel you have with Maddie now, because, you know, season one, it already sounded like you had such a connection to her, and now you've spent even more time getting to embody her at this point.
I felt like I could get this energy out of like seeing just, because Maddie's just watching all these people who didn't even know her comment on her and on her life. And I was like, how can I relate to that? And I was like, well, social media is one where I relate to that anger of just people, you feel silence because you can't say anything. And I felt this energy. I was like, that'll be fun to get out. Like, that frustration was just really fun. And there was like a lot of ways that I could relate to the character that is so different from me, but it felt like a really cool outlet. But it was funny because I remember on Twitter, my friends like, oh, this critic, they watched your show. They tweeted about you. You should go look. Like, they're a verified critic. I was like, oh, great. I looked at their Twitter and it's like, man, that Maddie character is annoying. And I was like, oh, no. Oh, no. I was like, yeah, that's nothing like me at all.
Well, it's such a great character, and I love the first few episodes of this season, and I'm excited to watch the rest of it. So congratulations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.